Welcome everyone to this Let's Play of Kerbal Space Program Release 1.0. Now in the previous episode, episode 1, I did say we would return to the spaceplane hangar to do a little work on the runway. And that's to hoover up a little bit of science. So let's pop over there and do that. Now one trick to remember is that there are a lot of biomes on Kerbin, and there are particularly a lot of biomes right around Kerbin Space Center, all of which will yield science. So let's pop on some goo containers and the D-Magic scanner. I don't really need two of them. And let's go and see what science we can hoover up on our gravel runway. Now poor old Jeb's not going to be going anywhere on this gravel runway, but that doesn't mean he can't do some science. So we got our science alert, and from there we can do a crew report for 1.5 science. We'll leave the EVA report. Let's do a magnetometer scan. There we go, one of them extending. And that's going to give us another 1.5 science. So we'll keep that. We can do the materials study with the Science Junior. 7.5 science, which we will keep. Thank you very much. We can do a mystery goo observation. Just see it opening up there on the side. And that's for 3 science. And finally, we'll do an EVA report. So there he is, standing on the top of the capsule, or hovering above the top of the capsule. So let's see if we can do an EVA report from here. There's no science from flying over Kerbin Shore, so let's recycle that. But that doesn't mean he can't get down and do a report. Here we go. If we press space, just walk away. There we go. And do an EVA report right here. So let's do that, and that gives us 2.4 science simply for smelling the asphalt. So we will pick that. Let's get back in and get recovered. So let's F to grab. Let's climb up and B for board. So that's all the experiments we can do right here. So let's recover this vessel and see how much science we have. So looking at the mission summary for our untitled spacecraft, you can see we actually gathered quite a bit of science just for sitting on a bit of gravel or asphalt, as we discovered from our crew report. So that gives us 15.9 science. Simply for sitting on the runway. Clearly we recovered all of our parts and all of the funds that we spent, and of course we recovered Jebediah. Now we can do exactly the same trick out here on the main launch pad to collect any remaining science from this little biome here. So let's go into the vehicle assembly building and do just that. Okay, so let's pick the Mark 1 command pod. Again, let's pick all of our scientific devices. I don't know that there's any goo samples to be taken again from the launch pad, but I don't know about the magnetometer. Maybe we'll get a magnetometer reading. So let's pop on out to the launch pad again and see what science we can hoover up from there. Again, we can see our science alert telling us there is science we can have. There are 3 experiments we can do, so not the mystery goo this time. We can do the material-based study from the Science Junior. That's going to give us a rather meaty 7.5 science, even if the experiment is rather superfluous. At this time, 7.5 science is a lot, so we'll keep that. We can do the D-Magic magnetometer scan. And that's only going to get us 1.5 science, but we will keep that. And we can do the EVA report. Now, like on the runway, I think we'll find there is no science to be gained flying over Kerbin Shore. So let's reset that experiment and press spacebar to jump down onto this rather burnt-looking launch pad. And let's get an EVA report again from Jeb, and that's going to give us 2.4 science for taking a check at the number 5 of 31 bus stops on the KSC tour. So let's keep that science data, and let's go and pop inside and see the summary. Now, having recovered Jeb on his own, we get his science, which was the EVA report, so that takes us up to 29 science. Obviously we didn't recover any parts, we just recovered Jeb. But of course we can recover our untitled spacecraft by clicking on its icon on the launch pad. And we don't want to fly it, we just want to recover it. So there we go, and from that we earned a further 9 science for our 2 experiments. We collected all of its parts, so we now have a handy 123,000 funds. And obviously its crew was empty because we recovered Jeb earlier. Now that gives us a total of 38.6 science, which I reckon we can spend over here in the science building. So let's go and do that. Here's the tech tree, and if you remember, we have stability for 18 science, which contains some aerodynamic nose cones, the winglet, our first winglet, and our radial decoupler. And we also have general rocketry for a handy 20 science, so that's 38 in total, and that gives us the swivel engine, the large thumper solid fuel boosters, and our fuel tank here, our little fuel tank here. Now with that, I think spending all of our science, leaving us with just 0.6 science left, is going to give us quite a few parts that we're going to need in order to complete some really interesting contracts. So let's go over and see Gene and find out what those contracts might be. Now at the moment we only have 2 contracts. We have Orbit Kerbin, which is going to be a little bit difficult, I suspect, with the parts that we have. But we do have Escape the Atmosphere. Now with our basic parts, we ought to be able to breach the atmosphere by flying a vessel to an altitude of 70 kilometers. We will get 50,000 in funds and 8 science and a nice 19 reputation. So I reckon we ought to accept that contract and build ourselves a vessel that will get us out of the atmosphere. Okay, so our contract says that we need to do a number of things. These are the automatic contracts that you're given from the World First Record Keeping Society, or whoever they are. They are things like set speed records, set distance records, and set altitude records. But what we specifically have to do is this one, which is to breach the atmosphere by flying a vessel at an altitude of about 70 kilometers. So let's do that. Start off with the command pod, and we wouldn't be going very far without a parachute, not on the way down anyway. So let's get ourselves a parachute. Now we need to pack on as much science as we can, so let's do that. Let's get a couple of goo containers, and we'll use the little service bay here to put our magnetometer in. So let's just do that. Now the magnetometer needs to face out of the side. So so what we're going to do is go into structural, get ourselves this girder segment. Let's get 1 girder segment, not 3, 1, and just clip it in like so. Now that sticks out the bottom, but if we right click, we can use the tweak scale mod to reduce it in size down to 50%, and then it fits exactly inside the bay. So let's go to our science tools, get our magnetometer, and we want that to fit on here. However, as we've previously seen, it does actually just clip outside of the bay doors, which, to be honest, doesn't look good. So let's open up the bay again, and let's see if we just flip this around. So which key is that? No, not the Q and E, not WS, so it must be A and D. There we go. So let's actually flip it around so it faces the other way out of the bay, across this little frame that we've cunningly built for us. So thank you, Jeb's Junkyard, for providing that little frame there for the magnetometer. So let's close that up. So that now fits neatly inside the bay. And the one last thing we need, I think, will be... let's have a look. What do we need? We need a heat shield. We need a heat shield. So let's put that on the bottom like so. Now that's going to come down with a bit of a thump, I think, with just the 1 parachute. So let's try, no, not 8, let's try putting those here. So we have magnetometer in the bay, we have the 2 goo containers and our Science Junior. And let's go to the Utilities tab and get 3 more more? 2 more, for a total of 3 parachutes. There we go, 3 parachutes. That should hopefully protect us from the thump when we hit the ground. So that's going to be our return vessel. It's just going to free fall back to Kerbin. Now we need to build the launcher. So let's get the stack decoupler. There we go. And then let's cram on. I don't know. Let's try. Whoops. Let's alt-click the top one and bring us down to 4 and then 6. Let's get ourselves, I think, the swivel engine, because we're going to have a hard time steering this space pencil. So we'll do that. Now, while we're in the science tab, let's get our Kerbal engineer on here so we know how we're flying. But we can use the ready provided Kerbal engineer display here to see that we have thrust to weight ratio of 2, which is plenty, and 2,793 delta V. Well, you know, we seem to have some spare weight and some spare parts that we can apply. So let's try some radial decouplers. We'll try 2 of those, and we'll also put on some of these RT10 Hammer solid fuel boosters. The reason we're doing that is just to cram on a bit more delta V. There we go, we're now up to 3,300 delta V. It's going to have to balance on its engine, not very elegant, but it's going to have to balance on its engine. And let's get some of our new AVT1 winglets. Let's get 4 of those. Make sure they are evenly spaced. There we go, is that right? Yep, I think that's right. Yep, that's okay. So we'll get 4 of those evenly spaced, and let's just double check the staging, get that all right. So we've got all of the engines here at the bottom, then we've got the separators, the radial decouplers for the hammers, and then on the way back down we can jettison that lump and then use our 2 parachutes. So that gives us 3,218 delta V. Well, if that's not enough, it's not enough. So let's give this a name. Atmos Mark 1. Let's save that, because we might need to use it. How on earth did I manage to get 2 Kerbal engineering systems on here? Oh dear. So let's go down to 1 Kerbal engineering system. There we go. Get that corrected. So there we go. So we have a perfectly reasonable vehicle, I think, for getting us out of the atmosphere. We can use this, I think, for similar missions, or adapt it for similar missions. We have 28 of 30 parts. That's okay. We're under our mass maximum for the quality of launch pad we had. So I suggest we get out there and launch. Well, I think Jeb is ready to go. We'll leave the throttle on about half because we have plenty of thrust to weight ratio, and we really only need the swivel engine for controlling our ascent for the, well, at least for the early part. So let's just get the T key on so we are facing straight up, and let's go. The hammers there are hammering away. We have our first science alert. Now, we could do the material study now, but I think I'll keep that for when we are out in space. So let's just do the crew report. We will accept the crew report. We will stage. We will throttle up. Let's keep all this under control as we go through the cloud layer. We are rushing on towards 7,000 meters. 7 kilometers. Let's just start beginning to turn over. You'll find turning over a lot easier once you get past that about 7 kilometer mark. So let's get over to our usual 90 degrees east, full throttle. The fins there keeping us nicely under control. There we go. Now if you look down here in the bottom right, we are being allocated and breaking a number of world first contracts. There we go, a speed record, altitude record, distance records. They're all falling like falling things. Green bottles from the wall. We can see our apoapsis here is now 40 kilometers. Records are a tumbling. There we go, with 50 kilometer apoapsis. altitude record, distance record of 17 kilometers downrange. That's excellent. And there we go. We are now at 76 kilometers of apoapsis, so we'll cut the engines there and just drift into space. There we go, we got 12 of these records so far broken. We still have our, I think, oh look, we've got a mystery goo observation, which must be flying over Kerbin's waters. So let's do that. We've got 2 of them. So we'll take, oh, that's from Kerbin's upper atmosphere. We get 9 science. So we'll take that. Again, we'll keep our materials bay experiment until we are out of the atmosphere to maximise the amount of science we're getting. There we go. We've got 13 records breached so far. As we drift, we're now 61 kilometres up. 76 is our maximum altitude, so we'll be well out of the atmosphere for our main contract. Still going, 65 kilometres. There we go, 67 kilometres. We're losing a tiny bit of apoapsis because there is still a tiny bit of atmosphere that we're getting some drag against. But there we go. Our altitude record of 70 kilometres, and we have met our main contract. Let's crack on and do our science. So we've got our mystery goo observation from space. That's going to get us 10 science. We've got our materials study from the Science Junior. That's going to get us 25 science, so we'll have that. Now we need to open the materials bay before the storage bay there, and now do our magnetometer scan. There you can do the magnetometer extending, and that's going to give us 5 science. So let's pick off and keep that data. So kind of, well, it's just a case of falling back down to Kerbin now. So let's withdraw the magnetometer into the bay and close the bay so that experiment is well protected. Now we don't really need this stage anymore, just have a little bit of fuel left in it, but we don't really need it, so let's jettison that away and prepare as we reach our maximum height here to fall back down into the water there. So somewhere in the ocean, not far from KSC, which is under the cloud base just there. So let's turn ourselves around, get our heat shield facing down. There we go, that's the retrograde mark, a little one with a cross inside it. So let's just get ourselves facing towards retrograde. Looks like we have a slight inclination, doesn't really matter for this experiment. Jeb, I think, is excited with his position here, floating in outer space. Good for Jeb. So as we're starting to fall back down now, 62 kilometres. So let's use time warp just to accelerate us down back towards the surface, and this is where we're going to start picking up some of the atmospheric effects and start picking up some of the heating. So there we go, falling down quite quickly now. Let's just reduce time warp and just get ourselves facing directly into the atmosphere. There we go. Here we are, thundering down. If we right click here, have a mod in that tells me the temperature of the heat shield in this example, so it's rapidly increasing up towards 500 degrees. Starting to get a little bit of twist here. So obviously this craft isn't exactly balanced. There we go, just bring it back round. Just coming up to 8 kilometres. No point in popping the parachutes just yet. Don't pop the parachutes while you are still above the thickest part of the atmosphere, or they will simply burn away. No use to anyone. So we're continuing to fall, getting more and more upright, and I think it's about time we pop the parachutes, turn off the SAS, and just let the drag of the parachutes keep us upright. So there we go. So we're falling back down in the ocean. KSC somewhere over the horizon on this side. 2.5 kilometres up. Our parachutes will fully open at about 500 metres above the ocean. So I think we've done rather well. Let's have a quick look at all of our contracts here. So distance record of 100 kilometres downrange, altitude 70 kilometres, and there we go, escape the atmosphere. That was our main contract, for which we got 50,000 in funds and 8 scientists, 8 science and 19 reputation, and there's the rest of our world first contracts. Just as our parachutes there open to their fullest. So there's distance 17 kilometres downrange, 26, speed record of 800. I mean, they just flow in. Look at all of those records. So we did rather well for our world firsts, and that's going to be pumping up our funds and our reputation, suitable for our next few missions, which I think will be much more interesting than just going up and going down. There's our shadow there. 4.3 meters per second, so splashdown is imminent. So let's just use the miracle of time warp just to bring us back down towards the surface a little quicker, because these 3 parachutes were definitely enough to support the weight of all that equipment that we had taken into space for scientific purposes. So there we go, 50 meters above the surface. Just about to splash down, see if all of these parts survive. They should do it, only 4 meters per second. That's touching down like a feather. There we go. Might even stay upright. No. No, Jeb's in for a bit of a swim, so let's just turn it round. So at least he's facing upright. Let's see what science we have. We have an EVA report that we can take. So let's see, if we've got EVA, let's pick that off. Yes, we hope sharks aren't going to jump this high, and we get 5.6 science. That's 5.6 science we didn't just have, that we now have safely inside the capsule. So there we go. So let's recover this vessel and go and see the mission summary. Well, given we had practically no science whatsoever when we began this experiment in space, we've actually picked up 66.1 science from all of these experiments, which is excellent, gives us a total of 74 science. We recovered the command pod, the chutes, the service bay, all of those parts we had in the upper stage. So we now have 500,000 in funds, and of course we recovered Jeb. So I'm looking forward to doing some slightly more exciting experiments in the next episode. So with that said, I'd like to thank you for watching, and hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.